So we're going to go now and look at Wendy Tokuda's garden in Oakland. So Wendy Tokuda is an award-winning journalist who worked as a primetime anchor in local TV news for almost 40 years, primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area. Her signature series on low-income kids, Students Rising Above, earned numerous national awards. My husband, Mike, was born and raised in the Bay Area. And as he told me, I grew up watching Wendy Tokuda. When I told Mike I was talking with Wendy, he said it was as though I had said I was talking with Michelle Obama. Wendy has written several children's books, co-authoring Humphrey the Lost Whale, which remains in print after more than 25 years. And I read Humphrey to my children many, many times when they were small. After retiring from television, Wendy now spends much of her time doing environmental restoration. She is well known for her broom removal work in Redwood Regional Park and also for her work with the Friends of Saucil Creek. It is now my pleasure to introduce Wendy Tokuda. Hello, Wendy. How are you?
Hey, Kathy, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Oh, most excellent. Thank you for that sweet introduction. I don't know about reminding your husband of Michelle Obama. That makes me feel really shy. But I love what you're doing here. I love what you're doing. I think it's really, really important for people to know more about natives. And we have become huge native fans. And I can show you some of the pictures from our garden and kind of describe how I evolved into a native plant gardener. That was me in my natural habitat. So let's see, I am going to show you some of the plants that I have put in our garden. And there I am right there. Hi, Kathy. Hi, everybody. And thank you for joining us. So I'm going to start with this first picture. If we could take the first picture now, let me see what I'm doing here.
Yeah, my God.
I started actually as a vegetable garden. This is our organic vegetable garden. And I got this house, in fact, because it had a flat, sunny backyard. We could fence in from the deer. But for the other 2/3 of the garden, we planted native plants. And there were some natives, there were some oak trees on the property, but basically we tore out lawns to make all of this happen. And we put in this stonework. You can see some of the stones here. And on this one, you can see on the bottom, some of the stonework we put in there to terrace some of the hillsides. And you can see the manzanitas that we put in for structure for the garden, as well as the stonework. You see a cyanothis there in the middle of the upper screen. In the lower left, you can see a coyote bush. I had a lot of coyote bush in originally, great habitat. I'll tell you later about what happened to the coyote bush. But this is one photo of our garden that gives you a sense of the structure and kind of the look we were going for overall. And here are the stairs going up into the garden, and you can see the manzanita in this picture. It's blooming, and there in the background you see 2 of the oak trees that were on the property that we allowed to grow up and to grow into larger trees. They were kind of struggling at the time. So I'm going to go through these plants by season, and I've picked out the ones that seem to be providing the best habitat for bees and butterflies and other insects and birds as well. And during the late winter, the manzanitas here are the first to bloom. And you can see here's an early visitor in our garden, one of the butterflies, but it's also full of bees as well in the late winter. And our garden is kind of a humming, alive place. When we planted natives, when we stopped using, we don't use any pesticides or herbicides in the gardens, and we started feeding the birds, it was as if our yard came to life. And you walk around a lot of other yards that don't have these native plants or things to attract these critters, and they are kind of, they're kind of dead, to be honest. There's no living, you don't hear birds, you don't hear bees, but in our garden, there were always visitors. In the springtime, a lot of the flowers start to bloom. And one of our favorites is the flowering red currant. This particular flowering red currant is a volunteer. We planted flowering red currant when we moved in, but it has also been volunteering all over the garden. And we've allowed a couple of them to grow into adults. And I've also given away a lot of the little baby red flowering currants. And needless to say that the bees in particular just go nuts on this plant. And later it forms berries, which a lot of the birds enjoy as well. Flowering cyanothis, California Lilac, is one of the show-offs in the garden. Every time it blooms, people just, your jaws drop. It is such a spectacular plant and provides good structure too. If you do plant these, get ready to do some heavy-duty pruning because it does require pruning to kind of keep up with it. This plant, the California pipevine, I planted particularly to attract a single insect, the California pipevine swallowtail. This vine can sometimes take years to take off. And then when it does, it forms this huge bush. Right here, you're seeing it in flower. And you can see why they call it the pipevine. Those flowers are kind of shaped like a Dutchman's pipe. And this is the butterfly that plant attracts. And I'm kind of in communication with other people who are growing this pipevine. We have kind of a Aristolochia club group on iNaturalist and through the Pollinators Posse, which is, by the way, is a great nonprofit to look into. But we have a group that is trying to get more of this California pipevine planted to provide more habitat for this amazing butterfly that's about 5 inches wide, the males when they're mature. This is another show off, flowering redbud. Just love this tree in the springtime. It blooms and it's a showstopper. Douglas iris, great habitat plant. Cow parsnip, I didn't even plant this in our garden. I was collecting cow parsnip seed out in the wild to plant in another local open space. And some of the seeds kind of dropped into my garden and we ended up with cow parsnip. And then I've kind of grown to really love it, particularly in the spring when it's blooming. It's just a great pollinator. Okay, here's another show off. Farewell to spring, the Clarkias. These are Clarkias that I planted from seed in our vegetable garden. So these are not the native Clarkia that you would find hiking out on the trails, but they are showy wildflower that we really enjoy having in our backyard. And here are some of the other native wildflowers we planted. And these are now some Clarkia, and then up in the right-hand corner, baby blue eyes. In the lower right-hand corner is milkweed, the native milkweed. This is actually the showy milkweed. The Clarkia and the blue eyes sort of self-seed. So every year they kind of come up on their own wherever they want. And that's always something to look forward to. This is the, what do I call it? Well, it's our favorite plant. I didn't even bother putting a name on it because I'm assuming everybody knows what the California poppy looks like, but it is I guess it's our flagship flower. We planted some when we first moved in. Since then, it is naturalized, just grows all over the garden, wherever it feels like growing. And it's become kind of when they flower, it's like an event for us. And I have to say also for our neighbors who, when they walk by, always comment on the California poppies. Some of them people have asked for seeds, which we freely give. But anyway, it's one of our favorites. This is another favorite as we get into summer, the penstemon. I think I have a better picture of that coming up. Hummingbird sage is a nice plant for growing in part shade. So we grow it underneath our oak trees. And in fact, yes, the hummingbirds do like it. Sticky yellow monkey flower. When my husband first wanted to plant this, I resisted because all the sticky yellow monkey flower I'd ever seen on the trail was covered with dust because it sticks on the sticky yellow monkey flower, get it? But I've come to love it. And we have in our garden a number of different cultivars planted. You can see in the background kind of an orangey one. Here's one of the orange ones, and in the back of that, you see a yellow one. Great pollinator plant, and really a very showy, beautiful, no maintenance plant. We just really love this thing. In the back, well, you can see some asters that are not blooming yet. Those are a great fall pollinator. And here is one of the show-offs, the Penstemon heterophilus. We have it planted in our front yard, in our backyard, and everywhere. Sometimes the deer will go after this. Deer are a problem in our native garden. And when we planted a lot of our plants, we had to protect them when they were babies. And then we let them grow after they were large enough to kind of be able to manage the deer problem. They just kept growing larger than what the deer would eat every day. And we have thriving pockets of this Penstemon now. Coyote mint, no maintenance, great pollinator. Woolly blue curls, not a local native, but a really beautiful California native. This is our walkway. The yarrow and poppies there, great pollinators. All these things I'm showing you are the most successful pollinators. This one was a surprising one because its flower is not showy at all. We planted it to create structure in the garden, but it turned out to be one of our best pollinators. It has these little teeny green flowers. And when it's flowering, you walk by this bush and it's just humming with bees. Coyote bush, I planted tons of it when we first moved in. I've had to get rid of a lot of it because we do live in the high fire zone and it is a highly flammable bush. So except for the low prostate coyote bush that we have, I've gotten rid of most of the coyote bush. Not because I didn't like it, but because it's a fire hazard. It's also a lot of work maintaining this plant, keeping it pruned because it hangs onto its dead branches. Showy flower in the autumn is California Fuchsia. California goldenrod's one of the great pollinators in the fall. And the oak tree, which Doug Tallamy touts, is one of the great all-around habitat plants across the country. And I don't know if you can see the wildlife. We got the garden registered as a wildlife habitat garden through the National Wildlife Federation. Here are a couple of local inhabitants. We did put up, we have about 3 or 4 bird feeders, a bird bath. Here's another resident in the stonework. It turns out the stonework provides habitat for all kinds of little critters. Here's another one that showed up one night, Calistoga wolf spider. Does not bite you, but wow, is it spectacular. And in the vegetable garden, we always have sunflowers for the bees. You have to be very careful when you plant sunflower seeds to make sure you get ones that are not pollen free, which is the way they're breeding them nowadays. And we also started growing dill in our garden specifically because of this, because it attracts the caterpillars from anise swallowtails. We enjoyed the caterpillars so much, you'd go out and there'd be 8, and then the next day there'd be 3, and then the next day there would be none, because yes, in fact, they do provide great food for the birds, but we also like them and they've become our pets. So we bring a lot of them in and raise them. And here we are with one of the results before it flies off. And then to my next gardening project, I call it advanced gardening. This is a French broom growing in Redwood Regional Park, where I started 17, 18 years ago, pulling French broom because it bugged me. It doesn't belong there. It's invasive. It seeds like crazy, and it squeezes out all the native plants. And it's a severe fire hazard. So we started forming work groups. You can see the broom there. You can also see, though, the oak trees that we're liberating by pulling this broom out. People thought we were crazy, or they thought I was crazy when I started pulling this stuff, and people would say, oh, that's great. One plant, now 64 million acres more to go. But, and there's some truth to that, I guess. But what happens is if you steward the area, you keep pulling, you know? So this was one of our early work parties on East Ridge, and you could see how much broom we were pulling out. But we kept at it. And the seed bank, the seeds last in the soil for decades. So you really, this becomes a stewardship project, not a one-time thing, but a project that has to be kept up year after year, which is why we got the rangers involved. And that trail that used to look like that, and I have all the broom lining it like a wall, looks like this now. So the native grasses are coming back, the native flowers. We didn't plant anything there. That's my Lucy the dog. And she's my technical advisor. And all of the native plants along these trails started coming back. And we discovered meadows that were covered with broom that we liberated by pulling the broom. This is a meadow that we try to keep open by keeping the broom from infesting it. It was intruding into this meadow when we started. These are some of the wildflowers that you now see in areas that were completely covered with broom, just a monoculture. I started working in some of the open spaces in Oakland. This is Beaconsfield Canyon, my favorite place. This is one of our work parties. We were pulling out, you can see the size of that ivy that we were pulling out. There was French broom, thistle. It was all full of weeds, basically, but there were also some native plants in there, like this trillium. And when we pulled the natives, we started to expose some of these natives, and they started to be able to thrive. And this is what the hillside in one of the hillsides in Beaconsfield looked like before we started working. The city would come in and just cut it to the ground for fire purposes. That's a good reason to cut, but they were also destroying any habitat. So what we've done is planted natives there, and this is what that same hillside looks like. This is a tight shot, but you can see some of the irises, the cow parsnip that are now thriving on that hillside. And it is also, this park has become alive like a little nature habitat. People come in there now to walk their dogs and their children. Well, it used to be really kind of a dump, and it was kind of scary in there, to be honest. Here, if you want to volunteer, here are a couple of places you can do it. Friends of Sasso Creek, Beaconsfield Canyon is one of the projects within Friends of Sasso Creek. It has many projects all over in the Oakland Hills. East Bay Regional Park, they have work parties all over the East Bay. We work me and my cohorts work in Redwood Regional, in Sibley and Huckleberry. But I think I need to kind of wrap up my talk now and see if anyone has any questions, and maybe you guys can talk me through here how I do that. Hello. Hey, Kathy.
Yep, I just came back and joined you.
Here you are.
And we can just leave this screen up, I think, and people can still take a look at that. So Wendy, thank you for that presentation. It was lovely to see your garden.
But finally, after I got past the technical stuff.
You know, it's so hard. Like we
even had a rehearsal and I still messed up.
I messed up too. We're just doing the best we can. You're a great weeder. So we can't be
I am a great weeder.
We can't be all thinking. Thank you for putting down your weed wrench and joining us today.
Here I am.
So I have some questions.
Sure.
So someone asked if pipeline swallowtails come back to your garden every year?
No, they do not yet. The pipeline Aristologia project, I'm going to give you a warning, is a real long-term project. The plants, first of all, take years to grow. Sometimes they'll just poke along literally for like 4 or 5 years, and then all of a sudden they'll explode if they're happy. The way I've also been raising, or foster parenting swallowtail, the pipeline swallowtails, and then I release them near my vines, and that's in hopes that someday they will be coming there on a regular basis. This year, for the first time, I found eggs on one of my vines, and I've had other friends who have pipe vines, and they've had them for many years, and finally, after about 4 or 5 years, they'll get eggs. But we have this, like I said, we have a group that kind of works together to foster these butterflies. And so sometimes there's one gentleman who planted pipe vine. It was a small vine, but about it happened to be in a corridor where there were a lot of swallowtails, and they laid all kinds of eggs on this little teeny vine. So he has been desperately looking for people with vines to foster parent those caterpillars, and I've been able to do that for about the last 4 years. Yeah.
Okay. So someone asked, is Dutchman's pipevine hard to grow? It's a slow grower, I think, isn't it?
Very slow. They're a riparian plant. I have found that they've been easier to grow from cuttings. We are planting them in some of the open spaces where we have jurisdiction or permission from the city to do that. It's particular, and you got to be prepared for a couple things. It will take years. When it does grow, if it is happy, it is huge. So not everybody can grow pipevine in their garden. It's just too much of a monster. So we've sort of had better luck planting it out in open spaces, in public parks, where we steward them to make sure that they, kind of baby them along the first year or two with water, and then hope that they take off. And, this project is new enough that I can't tell you that they're thriving in these new places yet. But I have a lot of hope for it because we planted it in riparian near creeks.
So I know when we were talking before, you said you started off gardening with drought tolerant plants,
Mm-hmm.
and you changed over to California native plants. So what was it for you that got you to change from the drought tolerant to native plants?
Drought tolerant to native, I think it was working out in the forest more and becoming more in tune with the natural habitat right around where we lived, and getting to know the native plants there and getting to appreciate the beauty of these native plants. And then, to be honest, when I read Doug Tallamy's book, it was life-changing. And I realized, we're losing habitat. This is a huge international concern, that we're losing habitat for our insects, our birds, our larger creatures. But we can all make this big difference by planting natives in our garden so that these animals have habitat throughout residential areas where they have not been so welcome in the past. And so I became a rabid native plant person. But I think it was working out in the forest that really, the more I became in tune with in the ecology of the area where I lived, my environment, the ecology of my environment, the more I wanted to replicate that in my own garden with the plants that I loved the most.
So if people are interested in volunteering, they could contact the Friends of Sawsell Creek. I know they have many work parties at Beaconsfield Canyon and in the demonstration garden, and aquatic insect monitoring and bird monitoring. Mm-hmm. There's also the East Bay Regional Park District, and we had the screen up for volunteering before. So I want to say, Wendy, it's probably time for us to go now, but I want to thank you so much. Oh, before I go, somebody did ask, several couple of people, where is your garden located?
Oakland Hills. Yeah, okay. Up in the Oakland Hills. And if anyone wants to find out, because I'm seeing a lot of questions about the pipevine, they can email me directly or message me directly through Kathy, or Pollinator Posse. If you go to Pollinator Posse online, you'll see our pipevine swallowtail link, and you can actually email me through that. And we're on iNaturalist too.
And also, let me say that if you feel up to it, Wendy, you could go to the chat box, and at the bottom, you can type in your own messages. So if you feel like sticking around and responding to some comments, you can just.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what? I just stay here in the chat room?
Just stay right there in the chat room.
Well, I may never leave, Kathy. I'm going to come to your house after this, and we'll just carry on.
That would be so nice.
Well, but my apologies again for messing up at the beginning. I'm so embarrassed.
It's live, like this program starting last year and this year, like running a live program has, I referred to it once as being like Sketchy Andy, that guy who walks across the Grand Canyon, no tightrope. It just means it's just that much more exciting. So I'm thrilled that we had our bumpy start. It means that we're doing this in real time.
Well, I'm trying.
Wendy, thank you so much. It was really
Hey, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thank you. Very sweet.
You're a change maker, man. You go, girl.
All right. So we're going to go on now to our, let's see. All right. So Let me ask if you have not had the chance to, if you're enjoying this program and haven't had the chance yet to help support us, we hope you'll do so now. You can do so via the donations button on the tour's homepage at bringingbackthenatives.net, on the tour's GoFundMe page, or you can mail in a check. The tour's address is under Contact Us on the website. So now, coming up. So coming up next week is the last day of this year's online virtual tour. And Al Kite will be with us one more time. He's going to be giving a talk on beauty beyond the bloom at his garden in Moraga. We'll be visiting Dan Wankett's garden in Concord. Dan's garden was designed by Kelly Marshall. Susan Friedman's garden in San Ramon. Susan is the owner of Susan Friedman Landscape Design, and she'll be talking about native plant garden design. Melissa Fiudi's garden in El Cerrito, not too far from my own home. And Robin Grossinger from the San Francisco Estuary Institute is going to be giving a talk called Making Nature's City, using historical and urban ecology to bring nature back to our cities. This is an early map when the Spanish land grant landholders were trying to retain their properties and had to go to court to try to keep the gold rush people off them. They made these maps called diseños that showed natural features that were there at that time. We'll be going to Cindy Simon's garden in Castro Valley. Cindy's a longtime tour host. And also to Kat Weiss's garden in Livermore. And Kat is a landscape designer, and this is her own home, and she'll be talking about transitioning from non-native ornamentals to native, so how she is gradually changing her garden over. And this is Kat Weiss's mother, Carol Hardesty. And lucky her, because Kat has designed her garden, and Kat will be giving a talk, still have that 80s lawn surrounded by mature non-native plantings. Time to envision and sheet mulch for your new native garden. And our last talk of this year is going to be another presentation by Mei Chen. Mei is a fabulous photographer of plants and insects and a great observer of the natural world. And Clisha Curley will be narrating this talk again, as she did a talk the other day. This is going to be Life and Death on Milkweed, and it was created from plants found in the Bridgeview Pollinator Garden, which is a Friends of Saucil Creek project.